Hi everyone, thank you for joining. I could see some people starting to join on. If anyone wants to chat in the chat box and just say where you're signing in from and what your name is and what you're most looking forward to learning tonight, that would be awesome. Hi Juanita from the Eastern Cape, and hi Natasha from Centurion. Great to have you here. Hi Pial from Gauteng. Great to have you here. Okay, awesome. I think we'll start in probably about 5 minutes. We just want to wait for a few more people to join. Hi, Iman. Lovely to have you here. I hope that this webinar is everything that you want it to be. I think it will be definitely very exciting. Okay, awesome. I think we're going to get started. So welcome everyone to the webinar today. We're going to be talking about the new normal after COVID, or whether there really is an after COVID. So just some house rules that we're going to go over. So if you have any questions during the session, please can you post them in the Q&A function. It'll just be a lot easier to answer them later and rather than the chat, and we will answer most of them towards the end or throughout the webinar. So I think we're going to get started. We're first going to start off with Prof. David Siegel, but I think we are first going to do some bios and introduce everybody. So first off, we have Prof. David Siegel, who works at the University of Witwatersrand a bit and is in the medical field. He is a pediatric endocrinologist and is also very involved in the telemedicine area. And then next in our speakers list, we're going to have Mr. David Downs, who is currently streaming in from Amsterdam, actually. And he is going to be talking about the property sector and going into how that has obviously changed as a result of COVID. And then next, we are going to have Professor Deacon, who is a professor in psychology at Northwest University. And she's also going to just be talking to us about how the psychology field has been changing and what we've seen as a result of COVID. And next, we're going to have Ms. Heidi Patmore, who is a marketing consultant and also a speaker and does quite a lot of cool things. And she is currently working in digital marketing, but she also has a lot of influence and is very interested in cryptocurrencies, AI, fintech, all of that cool stuff. And then next, we're going to have Kolekile, who works at MTN, as in quite high up there. And so that's obviously telecommunications. And that's one of the biggest telecommunication companies in Africa. So we're going to kind of really see how that has changed during COVID and where we're going to go for the future in that. And then lastly, we are going to have Gert-Jan Coetzee, who is in fashion. there he is. And we're going to hear all about how the fashion industry has changed. And I think that's going to be super interesting, just how the arts and everything has really changed as a result of COVID and where we're going to go next. So I think we're first going to start off with Prof. David Siegel. Would you like to take it away?
Sure. Thanks, Amy. And thanks for putting this together. I'm really excited. I think it's a great format and a great topic and much needed. I'm just going to put in a disclaimer that I'm not going to be talking about vaccines or ivermectin. So please don't ask me any question on those. So what I'd like to do is just give you an overview of the healthcare space. And honestly, healthcare has probably been at the center front of COVID in the last year and a half. And a lot has changed in the healthcare industry, some bad and some good. And we're going to hopefully pick a couple of trends. And for the students out there and people entering the healthcare field, hopefully give you a bit of a heads up of what you're going into and what to look out for and how you can prepare yourself for a career in the field of healthcare. I think if I answer the questions that were posed, we kind of got a little bit of a brief, and almost all of the speakers are going to go through a series of questions that hopefully cover all the areas we need to get covered. I am a pediatric endocrinologist, so I practice in the field of diabetes mostly, and also in the field of telemedicine. So we realized years ago that telemedicine was a way of improving care and delivery of care to people across geographies and across language barriers and culture barriers, and really is just a scalable way of delivering healthcare. So we'll be touching on that a little bit. But really, if I look at what's changed in healthcare, the biggest trends that we've seen, a lot of what COVID has done is it's accelerated trends that were already present prior to COVID. And one of those trends was obviously what started years ago, which is moving patients from hospital care and starting to manage patients in outpatient facilities, doctors' rooms, and then from doctors' rooms and healthcare practitioners' rooms into the home. So the medical home became a reality. And now we've actually got the medical individual. So lots of people are running around with wearables, sleep trackers, heart rate trackers. They've got access to Google. So really the patient has become a healthcare customer and a consumer. And I think that's one of the big trends we're going to see in the next few years is a direct-to-consumer marketing and management capabilities in the healthcare space, because a lot of people are entering the healthcare arena and directly looking for new customers. And the customers are sitting as individuals, not as large groups anymore. So I think that's probably one of the big moves. The other one is really a move towards tech. It's almost impossible as a practitioner in the healthcare space not to have tech anymore. You need a computer, you need electronic health records, data privacy and compliance issues, regulatory issues, telemedicine and ability to consult remotely are all things that are becoming part of your day-to-day practice. If we look at some of the other trends, just quickly, I think the communication is one of the things, and probably Kolakili is going to give us a lot more of this. It's a very scary place for the healthcare profession because there's a lot more social media. Google has allowed every patient to access health information that they didn't normally have and become experts themselves. That frightens some healthcare practitioners, but to be honest, I love getting questions from patients who've researched, because it tells you that they're engaged. It tells you that they're interested and they're willing to learn. Sometimes the information they can get out there is unfiltered and scary, but for the most part, it can be quite useful unless you're diagnosing and performing your own surgeries. And the other thing that's changed in the healthcare space is the ability to learn remotely. So healthcare practitioners themselves have become students again, both in the technologies that they need to upskill themselves with, but also to be able to do courses online, edX, Coursera, and those kind of courses, but also just accessing Google to improve your ability to be a better practitioner on a day-to-day basis. So I think all of those things are what's happening. So I think the new normal is really around telemedicine and telehealth, which is the ability to remotely diagnose and manage patients. And practitioners are going to have to get good at doing that. But it does increase your time demands and your resources. You actually have to invest in your structures, your Wi-Fi. You've got redundancy built in now. I have fiber, a backup LTE router, and other hotspots in the practice. You've got to be able to have cloud-hosted backups of everything so that you've got uptime and no downtime. the consenting and regulatory process has changed. So all of these things have changed, but what it does do is increase our volume of work. Because you're more accessible to patients than you ever were before, your demands have gone up, both in terms of email and responsiveness to social media and the likes. And then the last big new normal, and I think that is a big trend coming forward, is healthcare practitioners are going to have to start working with machines to get better. It's gone are the days where a single practitioner can be the master of all trades, and you're going to need to use support tools and decision support tools and technologies to be a good practitioner. So AI, machine learning, decision support aids are all going to be incorporated into the healthcare space going forward. I think the biggest negative from COVID has really been a loss of trust in the healthcare profession. I think a lot of that comes from leadership positions in the healthcare space, a lot of confusion created around COVID. So I think that's a problem. And we've seen a lack of caring. And we've seen it in hospitalized patients where you kind of hope that you'd get admitted to hospital and somebody was going to look after you and make that their mission in life. But we saw patients getting isolated. They were afraid, alone, and the communication and caring actually just vanished in a lot of scenarios. So in the last couple of minutes, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the fourth industrial revolution. We've got more and more healthcare practitioners being able to work from home, work from their office. There's a risk to healthcare practitioners seeing sick patients, especially with COVID, and a lot of them chose to work remotely and from home just to reduce their risk of exposure. But also patients decided to choose to stay away from busy practices to reduce their risk as well. So volumes in healthcare dropped, and they actually haven't fully recovered. And I think part of that is that patients are starting to make risk decisions that say, you know what, if I'm at home and looking after my kids or looking after myself, I'm willing to watch my symptoms for 1 or 2 extra days. And lo and behold, just like it's been for a few 100,000 years, humans have a tendency to get better without antibiotics and other things. And the volumes through doors and access to care is reduced. And I think that's going to be a long-term trend that doesn't change. And we are going to have to expect more remote work that increases accessibility and affordability to patients. But it really offers the ability to actually improve quality of healthcare delivery. And I think that'll become one of the primary focuses over the next 5 to 10 years, is on quality of delivering these other services. In terms of advice to you as students, it really is about upskilling yourself. It's not possible to not be tech savvy anymore in any profession. It just makes you slow. Technosaurs are going to die. And it's not okay to be a generalist anymore either. You're going to have to pick a niche and develop your skills in that area. So really, I think from a healthcare perspective, look forward to new ways of interacting with healthcare practitioners, and the old normals aren't going to be the same anymore. But very happy to take questions later in the presentation. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you so much, Prof. Siegel. So that was the medical industry and how that has been changing. Next, we're going to move on to the property industry with Mr. David Downs. Would you like to take us away?
Thanks, Amy. Good evening, everybody. By way of introduction, so my name is David Downs. I'm a Wits alumni, so hopefully there's some Witsies on the call there. So I'm going to spend a few minutes just talking about the real estate sector, or the property sector, as Amy mentioned. And the conclusion is probably not different to what Professor Siegel just said around the fact that the trends that were existing before COVID hit have just been accelerated in a negative way. The impact of the pandemic has just accelerated what trends were pretty much already in existence in the sector. I'm currently based in Amsterdam, and I work for what's called the REIT, a real estate investment trust. And what REITs are basically investment vehicles for investing in property. And the risk that everyone faces when they look at property is that they think it's a homogeneous asset class, that what affects a residential property in Johannesburg is the same that affects a shopping center in Sweden. And that's just not the case. Property is not a homogeneous asset class. It moves. Different variables affect different sectors and subsectors and geographies in different ways. So it's very difficult in 5 or 10 minutes to talk about the impact of COVID across all the different sectors of properties and the geographies across the world. But the one thing that is clear is that apart from airlines and possibly the tourism industry, property is a massive destruction of value in the last 18 months. And in fact, the initial destruction of value happened between January and April 2020, where you saw the market cap, and the market cap for non-financial people, it's a measure of value in a sector. And you saw the market cap of property companies throughout the world dropping 40, 50, 60% in a space of 2-3 months. So the value destruction was immense in the first days of COVID. And one thing is clear is that it wasn't difficult to see why there was value destruction. It's a little more difficult to see how it's going to come out of the slump that it still is in. So I will talk about the 1 or 2 sectors within property that I understand. So the first one, and is probably the easiest one to understand at face value, the company that I work for, it's a JSE listed company called Lighthouse Capital. It's listed on, like I said, on the JSE, and it takes money from South Africa and invests in Western European shopping centers. So you think about 2020, and for the first couple of months when COVID hit, shopping centers shut down in their entirety, hard lockdown for probably 3 or 4 months across Europe. So you can imagine what that does to investors' value. So those are the first few days of COVID, or first few months of COVID. It has then, or subsequent to that, there's been irregular and erratic trading patterns. If you try and go into a shopping center down the road here in Amsterdam or in France, you've got to have your COVID, your vaccine passports to get in, to order a drink, to sit at a restaurant. And all the shopping patterns, and anyone who knows anything about property will know that when it comes to retail, it's all about patterns and data. All the shopping patterns have been upended in the last couple of months. But what was happening before COVID hits, and I think everyone will be aware of it, the trend that was significant in the retail sector pre-COVID was the advent of online shopping. And what COVID has done is absolutely exploded that world. So you would, the one stat that in doing research or in preparation for today, the one stat that pops up in the South African sense is that total online retail spend hit top 30 billion rand in 2020, which you rewind back 3 or 4 years and it was non-existent. So in 2017 it was 8 billion rand. So it's almost triple, or over 3 times the exponential growth in online trading. And what that does to retail properties, to shopping centers, you can imagine, it's disrupting the way these guys operate and the way these assets operate. Offices, another subsector that we operate in. You can imagine a work from home, which barely existed 2 or 3 years ago, has now become the norm. You just need to kind of open up and Google any major multinational companies, and you can see that they're all, PwC announced 40,000 of their staff in the US no longer required to come into the office. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what the impact of that will be as an investor into the real estate sector. In Europe, the average work from home pre-COVID was below 1 day a week. It's now sitting at 3.5 days a week. So the demand for office space and new offices, it's been obliterated in the space of 18 months. The trend was already there, but its impact has been exponential. It's not all bad news in the sector. You look at logistics, distribution centers, last mile, what they call last mile logistics. So that's your DHLs, your in Europe, Amazon, Bol, all of these online retailers, and their explosion has just created an absolute a glut of demand for last mile logistics in these distribution centers to get goods out to people that are online shopping. The other big trend, and it was something that started in 2008, but has been more pronounced post COVID, is in 2008 you had the financial crisis, and how did governments react to the financial crisis? Is they dropped interest rates because they were trying to stimulate spending by using monetary policy. So with interest rates coming down, it became more and more affordable for you and me to go out and buy homes. So the residential sector was supported by stimulus. And what's happened in COVID is those interest rates have come even further down, which, despite the uncertainty that COVID has created, you've had the cheapening of money such that almost anyone can go out and buy a residential their home, residential real estate. So you can borrow money in Europe, 30-year money as an individual at below 1.5%. And that has helped prop up the residential sector in the industry. So you can see there are one or two positives, there are one or two negatives, but the one thing is clear is that there is a lot of uncertainty. And all COVID did was kind of throw a cat amongst the pigeons in the sector and caused an already confusing kind of situation to kind of be even more confusing. But it's not all bad news. And the company that I work for example, is kind of taken a counter-cyclical approach. It thinks that, and what I mean by that is we've gone out and last week we closed the acquisition of 4 shopping centers in France. So while there's all this turmoil in the market and lack of liquidity, we've gone out and actually bought assets that arguably are causing a lot of angst and concern in society. But the investment thesis is that things will normalize. They've already normalized compared to where we were a year ago. Things will normalize. People are social creatures. Shopping centers are the old town square where everyone comes together and meets and shops and all those good things. And yeah, I mean, kind of fortune favors the brave. So I think our view is that there's been an overreaction in the market. All this destruction in value is kind of is an overreaction, and you need to scratch below the kind of the headlines of News 24 and the like, and understand what the real drivers of movement in the sector are. And when you find those out, you can let me know, and we can try and make some money. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you. Just before we move on to Prof. Deacon, there is a question in the Q&A, and I think I'm just going to ask it quickly. So I'll read it out to you. So Amira is asking, has COVID increased the demand for property among investors? I think she's specifically referring to residential property, because considering whatever happens in the world, people will always need a place to live. So has COVID increased the demand for property?
Yes, I think COVID has, everyone has spent a lot more time at home. So I think having a comfortable operating environment where you can kind of live, work, and play all in one environment, it has increased there are so many dynamics that affect property. But I look at myself. I've just sold. I had my house on the market in Johannesburg because I moved here, and the Joburg property market's not great, but I couldn't sell it for 2 years. Straight after first lockdown, the market interest rates had come down. So I think the prime lending rate in South Africa is around 7%. So rates had come down, and I sold my place within a couple of weeks. So yeah, I think residential property, there is increased demand because it's more affordable, because people are spending so much more time at home.
Okay, definitely. And you don't foresee another housing crash? Amira has just asked a follow-up question. So this isn't going to say 2008 2.0.
Oh, Amira, I'm not an authorized financial services provider, so I will not be giving out advice on this platform because it's being recorded as well. I've got no clue. Okay. But if it's your first house, it's always good to make an investment. It's definitely, if you're based in Johannesburg, I'm not sure where you're based, it's definitely a buyer's market, and you can lock in great rates, great interest rates from the banks, lower than, I mean, you guys probably weren't around in 1998. Interest rates were sitting at 26.5% or 25.5%. Interest rates are now sitting at 7%. So it's never been a better time if you're making an investment for your first house.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Now we're going to move on to Prof. Deacon, who's going to be talking about psychology.
Evening, everybody. Yes, I'm going to talk about psychology, but I'm also going to talk a bit about the education sector in a combined effort to address both of them. So I'm a clinical psychologist. I've been registered for the past 20 years, and I've also worked in the education industry for 20 years in various roles, from student counseling to lecturing, research, and now a bit in management. So I think when we think of education, we all have our own experiences because you've all completed a degree or a program of some sorts, or the students attending are hoping to do that very soon. But I think in education, we have different experiences due to programs and lecturers and so forth, but the pandemic really just emphasized those differences for individuals. So if I touch a bit on psychology in terms of the pandemic, I think we've all heard it's actually a mental health crisis. A lot of people say the diagnosis of COVID is much more a mental thing than a physical thing. So there's a lot of need there that needs to be addressed. If you think of isolation, complicated and delayed grief, burnout as a result of the blurred borders between work and home, and all of that, just adding to anxiety and depression. So there's definitely a lot of things that we can talk about today. But if I think of the shift in the education industry, I think two things come to mind. Firstly, of course, the online learning. And I think we've grown a lot from the emergency remote teaching mode that we jumped in 2020 to where we are now with more blended learning. And I hope students also experience that there's more planning, there's more of a process involved there. But the second thing I think that was important and that actually assisted the industry education is that the ethic of care to students was emphasized a lot. So I want to echo the previous two speakers that the trends that was supposed to be, the things that we were to work on even before this was just accelerated and enhanced in this move. So there is a much bigger focus on who are our students, what are their needs, how can we really assist them, how do we create environments to help them to study. So the new normal, of course, I don't think we will be back to full face-to-face classes like we've had before. I think there has been a lot of issues in higher education that can be addressed through this, what we've learned in the past year or 18 months. But the negative things that we need to think of is things like assessments, how to go about. So I hear a lot of my colleagues talk about authentic assessment, scaffolding of assessment, assessing for learning and not assessing off learning. So there's a lot of rethinking going on in the sector that I think is important and that I think really will work towards transforming it a bit further. In terms of the need for psychology, I think I already touched on that with really, how do we get to clients? We have been on online mode, having Zoom sessions, but we all miss that personal interaction. And I think that's something we will probably all also agree on, that is something that needs to be emphasized. There needs to be more of that. New opportunities arose. I do think online learning creates opportunities for some students who were less eager to contribute in a class full of students because of the anonymity and the easiness to perhaps participate. Recordings assist a lot. And what I found is that if you approach this in the right way, a student might even get a better experience and get closer to the learning outcomes. So advice, in terms of teaching, again, education, I think it can be very daunting not to have a schedule, thinking you have all of these things that you have to put together. Where do I start? So rather stick to a schedule as you would have had if you had classes, work continuously. I think that's a general thing that we all need to do, and know where to get help. If I think back on the ethic of care. But I think the most important thing that the pandemic highlighted for me was that I'm a positive psychologist, so I really believe we should be looking for things that go right rather than things that go wrong. And it wasn't very far in that first lockdown 5 level that we started to see reports of people that went out to assist and to make a change and to really help those in need. So I don't have any skills that I want to add to being tech savvy and knowing how to manage your social presence. I think that's crucial. But I want to add an attitude. I think after this, during this, looking for reasons to eat, looking for reasons why things should go on, rather than looking for reasons to say, well, this couldn't work because of X, Y, or Z. So really focusing on positive, making plans. I do think somebody with such an attitude, with such a perspective in life, is probably going to go further and make a success. That was very short. I hope I touched everything. Amy, you must.
Thank you.
Please
No, thank you. That was perfect. That was perfect. I definitely think that we need a lot of positive psychology. I think it's very easy to become negative, and I think that's the new world that we need to live in. We are stuck at home a lot of the times. We have to sit in front of a computer screen with our lecturers on the other side. We don't see them. We don't know what they look like, and we just need to figure out the new world after that. Thank you so much. And with that, I think we're going to move on to Heidi.
Thanks, Amy. I suppose by way of introduction, I am a marketing consultant by profession. I've been working in the marketing profession for almost 20 years now. My specialty is tech, that's changing consumer behavior. So the company that I run consults to tech startups and helps them kind of set up their marketing and go to market in Africa. So it sounds like I do a lot of, David Siegel mentioned that I do a lot of different things, but it's just because I follow where the tech goes. So I watch the industries and watch where tech is changing consumer behavior. And then we just go and try and find companies that are doing interesting things in those spaces. So I'll go through your question list here, which was really interesting. It made me, I had to sit down and actually think and write notes. Thanks, Amy. So how has COVID changed your industry? I guess from a marketing, so I'll take it from a marketing perspective. So from a marketing perspective, there was quite a lot of shift in terms of consumers being under pressure. So, in marketing, literally our whole job is to understand how consumers are behaving and then figure out how to serve their needs, and get them to buy products. With consumers being under pressure, your ads just become wallpaper because everyone is so stressed out because there's now a mental health crisis. So spending became really unpredictable. So I think the only, as David Down said, the only place where we saw significant growth was when online shopping started to double and triple. And we've seen that across the South African industry, which I think has actually been good for South Africa. I think people who'd never tried online shopping suddenly started online shopping. People who'd never had their groceries delivered now have a 60/60 app or a Pick and Pay app or whatever. And I think that's I hope I'm not frozen. I look a little bit frozen. Did I freeze there for a minute?
You were frozen for a little bit.
So of course it's freezing while I'm in my talk. So sorry about that. Okay, so yeah, in terms of the consumer change, people under pressure means marketers are under pressure. So what was really interesting that we saw in our industry is marketers responding to what was going on with our consumers. So you started seeing ads with people with masks on. You started seeing ads of people working from home. So there was this big, it was interesting, like I was watching for it. I was like watching to see, like, now your ads all have like people at a concert. Now you can't have that ad because that doesn't resonate with anyone. It's actually going to piss everyone off because they're like, can't go party anymore. So like there was a real shift to like, okay, we see you and we're going to make ads that make us feel like, you know, we still get you, even though you want to be out partying. We know that you're at home, you know, having a disco in your lounge. So that was really interesting. I thought that the ad industry responded quite well to that change. In terms of the trends that have accelerated, definitely digital services. Like digital services have just exploded. Like we had one client that literally had 1,200% growth in 6 months. Like just because people want to be able to do the things that they can do from their smartphone. So yeah, it was really crazy. So that was really good for marketers. And then we also saw a massive, because businesses were under pressure. Am I frozen again? So someone move so I can see if I'm actually frozen or if you're all just like standing still. Okay, cool. You're all cool. Okay, thank you. Yeah, we definitely saw that digital services exploded. And my phone started ringing off the hook with businesses struggling and thinking, how do I reach my consumer now? Like they can't walk into the shop. Like, how do I reach them? And so we saw our business triple in the pandemic, which was, and other industries that we saw triple, construction companies, renovations, home services, landscape gardeners, all the stuff where people are staying in their homes and now you look around, you're like, oh, I really don't like that light. I think I need someone to come and fix that. You know, like because you're spending so much time in the home, those businesses, you know, because I then of course renovated my house and all of the contractors all said their businesses tripled in COVID. So it was really interesting. So I guess it depends which, you know, sorry for you if you were in commercial property, but yay for you if you were in online shopping, you know, like there was winners and losers. So the biggest negative impact, I would say, on spending, so just on general spending, like definitely we saw in January, February, March, there was like everything came, like March was like normal sales to zero, and then back in April, normal sales again. Like lockdown was like everything went to zero. It was bizarre. Well, understandable, but obviously not. So mental health. So you talk about mental health in the context of psychology, but you know, like when people are down, like, you know, like it affects everything. It affects, you don't feel like socializing. Now restaurants are closing and, you know, like it's not, you know, mental health affects consumer behavior. So that was definitely a massive impact on business, even though it was a psychology issue. In terms of what new opportunities arose, I think the work from anywhere trend is something that, so it was quite interesting for me because I've always worked remotely my whole career. Like I've always, well, like the last 10 years since I've left corporate, like my home has been my office for 10 years. My team has been remote. We were all remote before the lockdown happened. So we had Zoom 5 years ago, you know, like when no one had ever heard of Zoom. So for us, it was a very normal transition, and we ended up coaching our clients as to how to keep your team as a team, even online, you know. So I think that was quite a interesting opportunity. And so as much as it was like not nice to not be able to, you know, have a chat at the water cooler in the office, there's been a lot more opportunity for people to be able to sell their services online in other markets. So now you can be like I had a friend who started a creativity coaching online thing, and she has clients in the Netherlands because she just has to sit in her lounge, and now she's teaching people to doodle online. So, you know, which she would never, you know, like she had struggled to start that business because no one wanted to come to her house to doodle. But as soon as she made it an online offering, she now had a business. So I think that there was lots of opportunity there. So I think as students, you got to think like that. You got to think like, where's that gap? Where's that opportunity? So don't be scared that we don't have offices. Like, think, how can you sell what you have in another way? So that's my take on that. What advice can I give to students and graduates? So this is coming from someone who was a teenager in the 90s, where there were no phones and there was no internet. And my advice is, protect your reputation. Don't do anything that can be recorded on a screen that will live with you, will haunt you for the rest of your days. So it's got nothing to do with pandemic or anything, but just don't do that. And the second one is, being an influencer is not a real job. It's a hobby. So I know all the teenagers all think that they're going to make money from influencing. It's not. What skills do you think young graduates should focus on? So I wanted to say that sometimes you think that because you're 22 and you've only just graduated and you have no experience, that you're not hireable. And I just want to say that that's not true. Your age in this day and age is in your favor. The fact that you are young and able to adapt and be flexible and agile is something that a 50-year-old is going to struggle with in the new work economy now. They are going to struggle. And you are going to be like, what's the change? Okay, cool, we're going to run with it, So I think you've got to take that attitude, but don't be scared because you have no experience. Be like, no, I'm going to be agile and flexible because I'm 22, and I can be. So kind of like use that to your strength. Like, don't worry about the fact that you don't have any, experience. Like, the fact that you are young and agile and digital savvy and tech savvy, and you've never grown up in a world without an internet and cell phones, like, use that to your advantage. So be willing to adapt. Don't be scared to speak out. Bring your ideas. You don't have to worry that, there's people that you're competing with who've got lots more experience and are older and wiser. They didn't grow up with the internet. Like, you have that, and leverage that. And then just one last point, I'm hiring. So if anyone does marketing and they're very good, please come talk to me. So since I'm talking to Golden Key students, and that's me.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Heidi. So next we're going to have Mr. Ndamasa, who is at MTN. Kolekile, are you ready to go?
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Hi, everyone. My name is Kolekile Ndamasa. I lead the mergers and acquisitions and business development initiatives at MTN Group. Just, I guess, briefly on what MTN Group is for, if anyone doesn't know. It really is one of the largest telecoms companies in the world. It's listed in the GKSA and operates in 21 countries across Africa and the Middle East. But I mean, effectively, what telecoms companies do is they really provide the connectivity, and they do this by building, the network infrastructure, and over that, they then provide services such as voice and data and digital and fintech services. And I think how COVID has really affected the telecoms sector has really been quite the opposite of what, David Downs was talking about in relation to the retail property sector, where, there was massive drops in demand. I actually think, the telco industry, as you can imagine, experienced completely the opposite. In the sense that, the network usage skyrocketed, as a function of the fact that now everyone was staying at home for both in terms of work and in terms of entertainment. People are entertaining themselves at home and working from home. So the demand for, connectivity and network infrastructure was actually just, I think if we were to look at some of the data, I think network utilizations, kind of in probably in most of our markets and probably globally, escalated to, 200% to 300% in certain places. And of course, the telcos then had, this fundamental problem of how do you ensure that, the network is reliable and can be able to, immediately absorb this massive demand that's just spiked literally overnight. And, it really kind of changed the perceptions of telcos from, well, they provide voice and data services, to telcos becoming utilities. They became systemically important as banks or as electricity companies and water companies, because all of a sudden, if the network is not working or the network is down, the effects of that across different industries, would have become, catastrophic. But the one thing that really happened here is, telco companies had then to really in the background work with governments to try and really build this capacity. And I mean, if you take South Africa as an example, the government, made spectrum resources available to telcos to really now increase, the efficiency at which the telcos, can be able to provide the connectivity and improve the reliability and the resiliency of the networks. It was probably, the biggest crisis facing telcos was the fact that, would the networks be able to, withstand, the excessive demand that came through. And so I think, the stakeholder engagement, the stakeholder relationships really did facilitate a much better relationship between telcos and governments, between telcos and communities. And I mean, of course, we operate in Africa and the Middle East. And of course, unlike, let's say, in Europe and let's say North America and probably some places in Asia, our customers are not wealthy people. So, not only was there this massive demand to provide data, but it was also a massive demand to be able to drop the cost of providing the data services, such that, people can be able to afford it. And so you have seen then telcos providing initiatives like zero rating, some websites for education, for information for, websites for governments. They would be able to see if, you can be able to zero rate that. But really, as both David Downs and David Siegel did say, it did accelerate, the whole digitalization of everything that, everyone is doing, especially from a communications perspective, and the importance then of building this, the infrastructure to be able to support that and to be able to do it in a manner which was so accelerated that I think if it was not for COVID, the capacity built on the networks would have taken us, 3 to 5 years to develop. And it all kind of really had to be done within a space of a year. So, I think that's been really some of the developments. And I think one of the interesting things in the workplace, I specifically focus on mergers and acquisitions. And so my travel schedule used to be really, really crazy. From, I think as an example, if you were to look at the first 3 months of 2020 before COVID hit, I think I spent 2 weeks in South Africa, and then that every other time I was in a different part of the world. Whereas when COVID hit, I was just locked up in my house, same screen that everybody sees on the background. and I'm doing now everything digitally, because the thing is, the work didn't stop. The mergers and acquisitions, transactions, slowed down a little bit at the beginning, but we had to find, completely new ways of really working digitally. And so I think it's really accelerated everything, that has been going on. And I don't really believe that the trend is going to reverse, particularly in our industry. I think instead what we are seeing is the fact that, digitalization is accelerating. And so we're continuing to develop, digital platforms, fintech platforms, which allow, for people to be able to do all these things digitally. I mean, if you look at the African economies, most of them used to be like completely cash-based, whereby people transact on utilizing physical cash. But with the advent of COVID, everything is moving towards no touch, and therefore you then have to find that you need payment platforms where even where people are not using smartphones and they're still using feature phones, they have to be able to pay, using those old, SSSD numbers, the *131 *# that kind of situation. So that stuff had to really be developed to be able to enable people to collect their social grants, to be able to then go and be able to purchase things without actually utilizing physical cash. So it's just really accelerated, the fourth industrial revolution. And I think it's opened a Pandora's box that it's not going to be able to, to close. And I think it was Heidi that did say, it's creating then an explosion of opportunities for people, to do e-commerce and to be able to trade online. I mean, everyone has been talking about, we kind of saw, with the advent of the Ubers and everything, like Airbnb and the disruption. I think the new opportunities that have arisen now, which are driving, the disruption of industries, because everything is being digitalized, has accelerated exponentially. And I think, depending on how you think about things, you can either see this as completely exciting or as completely terrifying. But I think there's tons and tons of opportunities there to be seized. Thinking about, just what I think, students and graduates need to, what kind of would prepare you for the new workplace. I think the way of working has changed. By and large, during the COVID period, we have really been focused on working from home. But now that, people are getting vaccinated and, COVID levels are, we're finding better ways to manage COVID, and we're going to start slowly returning to the workplace. I don't think that we are going to fully return to the workplace. I think you're probably going to have some hybrid situation in most workplaces where there is maximum flexibility for people to be able to work from wherever they are. And I think this is going to be then fantastic, for the younger people coming in. It's got upsides and downsides, for joining a corporation, because for people that are experienced and they know what they have to do, people just do whatever they have to do and they know what jobs and they can communicate digitally. But whereas I think younger people who join a workplace need to have a little bit more where you see the people in order for them to remain top of mind, to be able to say, okay, yeah, you need to do that. And I think that my advice is, I think, quite similar to the previous panelists, is of course, you need to be digitally savvy and you need to love the digital stuff, but you guys already do that. but I think you need to really be conscious about, being proactive and being engaging, and trying to improve your social skills with people who come from a different paradigm, who are maybe not as digitally savvy as you, but you need their experience for them to be able to guide you, to be able to have access to the opportunities. So that level of proactivity, where you become a self-starter and you can be able to do things for yourself, and you kind of, are engaging, you take things and you run with them and you engage, is going to be like really, really critical. But also more importantly is I think you need to really take care of your mental health. And I don't know whether this is just like really a projection because, older people are struggling with the rapid rate of change. And perhaps you guys are younger, your mind's a little bit more agile, and you maybe will have significantly less mental health issues than we do. But I think it's something that you kind of need to be cognizant of. But yeah, I mean, Amy, that's my little bit. I hope it kind of helps in some way.
Thank you. I definitely think your last point is very important. We need to figure out how to talk to the people higher up at corporates and actually engage with them. We can't just sit and wait for people to tell us what to do. We've got to take some initiative. And our last speaker, thank you so much. We're going to have Mr. Kutsia, and he is a fashion designer. So can you come on, Mr. Kutsia? We're looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Hello, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Amy. I really liked what Heidi was saying about the digital kind of like e-commerce space going boom with COVID, because that is literally what happened. The moment COVID happened and lockdown happened, as a whole fashion industry, I think we went from glitz, glamour, and cameras flashing to nothing, and then back again. So that was quite scary and something to truly adapt to. But if there's one thing that the fashion industry knows to do is predict trends. So I think for me as a designer, I have been wanting to go digital for the longest of times. I mean, what is better than sitting on an island somewhere and seeing your Shopify account going ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching? So that has kind of always been my aim. And I think a lot of my peers and fellow fashionistas in the industry, that is always kind of the aim, to be able to streamline the processes and procedures in your company to a level where you could just work from anywhere. And that has been really what my industry has been. I think the trends that I've seen happening throughout the whole COVID experience is definitely lots of people quickly grasping at straws, trying to go digital. I think the first few weeks of COVID, what happened for me was I had this big payroll of staff, because what we did full-time was make wedding dresses and part-time sell t-shirts. And I had to find a clever way of employing that stuff. And I think for me, that is one of the most important business lessons that I learned throughout COVID, is really to be more creative. I think if you think about creative people like fashion designers and artists, you really think just the drawings or the clothing, but it's really going a little bit further to the business side of fashion and the business side of anything, and how to be a little bit more creative in that. Where we quickly started to make masks just to support ourselves day to day. I'm a firm believer in planning. So in a very, very early stage of my career, and that's also something that I cannot stress enough whenever somebody asks me for advice, is to plan and to really save for the future. When COVID hit, we definitely did have a few months of savings, but now, as we know, it has been 2 years. But definitely throughout finding our feet and all different types of the industry, in industries, when you have to find your feet, it's very important to kind of have that safety net to fall back on. Having that nest egg that you can always just rely on, and then making a plan and allowing yourself to have that plan, and time to implement that plan is quite important. I want to just have a look at your fabulous questions that you've sent through to me. What is the new normal look like in the fashion industry? You know what, like I said earlier, is that the fashion industry is very good at predicting trends. And we didn't know COVID came, sorry, but we did kind of know that we were going to go digital at some point, and we were going to really have to be careful and prepare ourselves for that. So some of us did and some of us didn't. And I think who came out on top of this horrible epidemic was the people that was planning ahead. What the definite trend that has been seen across all platforms, and this is not just fashion, this is technology, it is everything, has definitely been sustainability. And that is something that I cannot reiterate enough, because ticking all the boxes in your life and in your work life and in your career is super important. Whether you have an extreme passion like I do for sustainability, or you just want to do something because you're scared of losing out, it's rather best to focus on having some sustainable products, because you get people that only wants to shop for that. Having stuff for different markets is definitely very important, and diversifying yourself. My biggest mistake was only creating wedding dresses, where at a point we were just doing couture garments, red carpet garments, we were dressing celebrities, we were on every red carpet, and then everything stopped, and now what? So what I've definitely taken from this, and my advice would be, is to diversify yourself to such a point where you're not just reliable on one source of income, where you can really definitely get different streams coming in through different avenues of business. For me, for instance, I used to do wedding dresses. Now I sell t-shirts as well, which is amazing, because I never knew people wanted to buy hat t-shirts. It turns out they do. So it has really like flipped my market and really like created different streams of income that can make me or allow me to sit on a beach one day and sip a cocktail while my Shopify goes crazy on my Apple Watch. And that is the type of things that I really wanted to streamline. And also, when it comes to marketing, it's very interesting, because pre-COVID, it was super easy. I created something, I slapped it on a celebrity, and people bought it. Where now people are a little bit more careful with their money, especially when it comes to luxury products, where you cannot touch and feel and smell it. Now you have to imagine. And that is luckily where social media comes in. And that is also what we completely took advantage of, is bringing across that touch, smell, feel in a video, not just doing stagnant social posts, but really engaging with the audience. And I feel sometimes I have people telling me, well, I'm a doctor, so social media isn't really for me. And I'm thinking, social media is exactly for you. You need social media to connect with your people, especially if you're a specialist in some sort of a field, like for instance, a plastic surgeon. You want to make videos that's educational for people to also build that trust in you. And I think, especially when it comes to e-commerce and what's the English? Getting my customers from my social media following to become online store customers really creates trust. And how do you create trust is to thicken the honey trap by really making it so super easy for them. So what we immediately did, as lockdown hit, we set free shipping worldwide. Free shipping in South Africa anywhere. Worldwide, purchases after a certain amount gets free shipping. And that opened up the market and the trust that people got in us as an online store completely, because then they felt that if something didn't fit, or they didn't like how it touched, smelled, or felt, then they can just return it. So that also creating the trust in it and diversifying your marketing. I loved what Heidi also said about the marketing side. But I really feel that for me, my whole business is run on social media. If Instagram dies tomorrow, what is left of my business? Because it's pretty much only run on Instagram. So that is why, courtesy of Mr. Gary V, we have, and his advice, I have focused on going onto TikTok, going onto Facebook. I hate Facebook, but going back onto Facebook, really finding things to say on Twitter, even though I'm more a visual person. But really, when one platform falls down, you have at least another one. If people stop getting married, start selling t-shirts. If fashion closes completely, start selling perfume. If that doesn't work, go into interior. It's really about the creativity of business. And that is advice that I can bring across any industry. If I've missed anything, but I think that is kind of my skill set and my advice. Okay, let me just give you my advice, and this is my closing. And my advice would be to always kind of uplift yourself. So I think my biggest kind of skill and attribute to myself is that was a skill that I've cultivated, and motivating myself and being able to stand up when life hits you down. And those type of things you get by listening to a panel discussion like this. I'm awestruck. By mix with more of what you want to be like, and you will become that. And just have so much passion and drive, and just stand up and do it. Mel Robinson is my favorite motivational speaker. And she always says, no one is coming. Help is not coming. Your mother's not coming to help you. Your father, nobody's telling you to get out of bed except you. This is all on you, and this is your responsibility. So if you want to make something up yourself, you have to get up and do it, because no help is coming. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely amazing advice. And I do also just want to point you towards the chat function. You have two fans, Amira and Iman, that are sending you messages in the chat function. But thank you so much for your amazing advice.
Guys.
I definitely think that it applies to everything. And I definitely think that's what a lot of students need to hear right now. So we're running a little bit over time, actually, but we're going to move on to some questions. There's some Q&As in the Q&A feature. If you do have any questions from the attendees, please do post them in the question and answer function. So first we have a question for Prof. Siegel. Payal is asking, with regards to electronic equipment and machines in private practice, what type of equipment are you referring to, especially which ones are most used? Prof. Siegel? Okay, cool.
So a piece of equipment that never got used much was actually a telephone. It was always for inbound communication with your receptionist, but actually it's for outbound communication, because a connection between a healthcare practitioner and a patient, for example, or a customer, needs some communication tools. And it turned to be a phone, because we can hear and we can ask. And in fact, there's a lot of advantages to listening and asking carefully. And there's a lot in telemedicine that actually has improved communication for healthcare practitioners and patients, apart from just crossing geographies and reaching out to people. But the computer is essential as well. We need access to Google. You need access to resources where you can research new things and new diseases, and be curious always to learn from every single patient we see. I learn from every single patient we see. But if you talk about specific technologies, they're very specific to your fields. So for example, in my field, in diabetes, we've now got continuous blood glucose monitors. We've got a little patch you can wear on your skin that measures your blood sugar continuously and shares data with your healthcare practitioner. We've got insulin pumps that can measure your blood sugar and deliver insulin automatically. You've got other wearables that can tell you how well you're sleeping, what your blood pressure is doing, what your heart rate is doing. So your ability to collect signals about health and incorporate them into a treatment plan and improve the experience, quality of life for people living with certain conditions is ever expanding. And everyone's coming up with new and novel ways to engage with healthcare customers and patients.
Thank you so much for that answer. And I think we're going to wrap up this session with a question for Mr. Kutsia, which is from Amira. And she asks, what is advice you live by as a fashion designer when it comes to business?
Wow. You know what? My best advice is to really surround yourself with people that knows more than you do. For me, when my business was getting stagnant, I immediately phoned up my head of department where I was studying at the Northwest School of Design in Clarkston, and I headhunted her and got her to come and work for me. So I think it's very important to always surround yourself with people that knows more than you, and you'll just go far and far and far.
That is the perfect answer. Very short and sweet. Thank you so much for answering that. And thank you to all of the panelists for joining. I think this has been an amazing session. We've definitely learned a lot. A lot of the students, I think, are really, we just have learned a lot, I can say, from myself and from the rest of the panel. So thank you, well, from the rest of the students, I'm sure. So thank you so much for everybody for joining, and we look forward to hearing more from you guys in the future. So thank you for joining, and yeah, this will all be available on YouTube. If any students didn't get to join or any of that, you can always come back to this advice. I definitely think that it'll serve you in the long run. So thank you, everybody, for joining.